Hi everyone, my name is Christina and I'm an implementation consultant at Prosymmetry. In this video, we'll talk about annual planning in Tempus. There are, of course, a number of ways you can use Tempus to execute your annual planning strategy, but in this video, I'm going to highlight what we would consider a best practice. What we'll talk about is how to load in your incoming projects, prioritize them through attribution, and then model out how these new projects will fit into the existing landscape of ongoing work, and make decisions about how and when to sequence your new demand. We'll also take a look at using a portfolio planner report based on this model data for a quick visual representation of your new annual plan. So let's take a look at how this works in Tempus. So let's assume you've come to the point in your year where you need to start looking at planning next year's projects, so 2026 in our current timeline. You will have projects, of course, that are already in flight, and then you will have a new list of projects that you need to bring into the fold and identify the right sequence for those projects based on all of the other current priorities. Essentially, you want to prove out that you can take on this new work. So to do this in Tempus, you will want to load in your new projects as proposal projects. Then you're going to load in the general demand on those projects using demand planning resources or named resources if you have that granularity of information. And then you're going to assign these projects priorities to use that information in your what if model. So let's take a look at these proposal projects for annual planning. So here in my project management grid, I have a couple of projects loaded in for 2026. I've loaded them in as proposal projects. So you can see the proposal icon is turned on here because this is proposal flag is set to yes. I have created these manually within my UI of Tempus, but of course you can load these in through an Excel import or through an integration if you have that set up. I have also created a specific 2026 annual planning priority attribute, a project attribute, that I have used to load the priority of these projects that is telling me what sequence these need to be folded into the existing landscape, which we'll take a look at in our model. If I click into a single project here, we can see how I've loaded the overall demand. I have loaded in the demand planning resources first because I don't know yet who is going to take on this work. I just know in general, I'm going to need a software engineer on this project, a back-end developer, and a front-end developer. If I look, I'm currently looking as FTE, but I can switch this over to time, and I can see for this entire project, it's going to require about 1,900 hours of work across the entire lifespan of the project. So I am viewing this at this high level project time granularity because, again, we're really thinking high level here, and you can load in these general amount or budgeted number of hours at the project level within the UI itself, or again, through that import. What's really key here is you want to make sure that your demand planning resources and your named resources are tied together through some kind of resource attribute that we'll be able to aggregate by within the what if model. So that way we're able to see for these new projects that are coming in that require these roles, what is the effect of those new projects on the existing allocations across the other members of the team. So I am using a team attribute here. Yours could be called team, department, division, whatever is applicable at your organization. But we are going to aggregate in the model by this team attribute. So I have gone through this process for all three of these projects. I've loaded in my general demand, and then now I'm going to bring them into a model to see how these new projects affect my existing landscape and figure out what is the best order for these projects to take place in 2026. So I'm going to flip over to my model here. What we can see is that all of the existing work that's already in place is in blue. All of the new work is grayed out at the top. And we are going to use our annual planning priority attribute that I have pulled in as a column to dictate how we want to load in this new work and assess the impact on my current allocations at the bottom. It's also important in the build of this model that I choose to include proposal projects so that I do get these proposal projects loaded in already and automatically excluded from the current landscape. I also want to make sure I include partial projects, which would include all of the other in-flight work that maybe doesn't neatly fit into the timeline that I've chosen to model because I want to be future forward looking for 2026. We can already see the teams at the bottom. Again, I'm aggregating by that team attribute. And we already see that there is some strain on these resource teams throughout the year. So now we want to see what does it look like if I bring in this new demand. So I'm going to use my annual planning priority attribute to help me do that. Of course, I'm going to start by loading in project priority number 1. And I'm going to do that by clicking the ellipses and clicking include next to this project. I've already seen a couple of these overall allocation percentages jump up, so that's just good information for me to know. At this point, I could say this is already seeming like it's too much work going on and I can make some decisions about sequencing. I can, of course, play with the Gantt bars of the different projects here. I can move them around and shift them, extend projects, compress projects, all based on that one decision. If I want to continue pulling in all of the projects that I have slated for 2026, I can go ahead and do that by including priority number 2 and priority number 3. Here is now a look at how this has affected all of my resources and the overall arching teams at the bottom. From here, I can make some decisions. Again, I have the ability to model out what happens if I move projects to move them to different points in the year and see if that alleviates any strain. I can decide to exclude entire projects, simulate what happens if an in-flight project gets canceled. Would that alleviate any strain on my resources? I can extend projects if I need to see if I extended that project, would that alleviate any strain and make it so that these new projects can be completed as they are high priority projects. I can also, of course, click into some of these cells to see what is driving this overallocation. I can pull in a utilization and sort by highest utilization so that I can see which project is creating the most overallocation within this month. And then I can make decisions from there. Maybe that project needs to be extended or excluded altogether and see what's the impact on my resources. I can also, of course, see which teams seem to be the most overallocated. In this case, it looks like software development may need some more people on this team to accommodate this new work. So I can play around with headcount changes by clicking the pencil icon. And let's just say I want to increase this team, theoretically, by maybe 3 full-time employees. I'll update the preview there. And I can see that in April 2026, for example, previously my allocation percentage for the team was 129%. By adding 3 people, I brought it down to 105%, which may be more acceptable to my organization. So I could even apply that and see that change take place within my model. So I've got a lot of options within the Gantt view of the model to play around with the sequence of the existing projects and the new demand coming into my portfolio. I can also, of course, go over to the grid view of the model and get even more granular with the projects and the actual people assigned to the projects and those generic roles I have to assign to projects, and even do some simulations of resource replacing actual people with different roles and see how those kind of changes could affect my current landscape and make it so that the overallocation is reduced down to acceptable levels for my organization. So this is one look at my annual plan, taking into account all of the existing work, the new demand coming in. There's another kind of visual representation you can leverage of your annual plan in Tempus, which is called a portfolio planner report. So we'll take a look at that as well. I'm going to go to report management and click into a portfolio planner report that I created. that is based on that model data. So here, what this is showing me is all of my in-flight work, and then the new demand is brought in as well. They're represented by the little colors on the bar charts. This capacity line is representing all of the capacity for all of my teams, and I can clearly see where in what months I am exceeding that capacity line by including all of this work, all of the 3 new projects I brought in as well. From here, I can do some kind of light modeling by clicking on this folder icon and play around with the sequence of these projects to see when could I bring those allocation levels down so I'm not exceeding capacity. So I can reorder projects by dragging and dropping, and the model will change. I can force projects in or out to see what is the effect there on the entire landscape of projects. So just by excluding that one project, it brought down the allocations to more acceptable levels. But yeah, using this folder icon here is where I can play around with the sequence. I can also pull in attributes to help me sequence these projects to account for the priority. So I can pull in that 2026 annual planning priority attribute and sort by it so that I'm making sure those 3 projects are sequenced first and that everything else can kind of move around them to find the best sequence for all of my projects, taking into account all of my resources and the current strain they already have on them. Once you're satisfied with the sequence of your projects through modeling in What If and maybe using a portfolio planner, and you are comfortable with the utilization levels of all of your impacted teams, you can even then bring this project plan to life in your live Tempus environment by exporting the model data through a pivot grid in Tempus and re-importing it into Tempus through an assignment import. Basically, the intention there is to shift your project start and end dates to reflect this new sequence. We have a great video in the use case section of the Help Center on exactly how to do that. But this wraps up the use case video on annual planning in Tempus and a best practice there. If you need additional information, I would recommend reaching out to your Tempus representative or check out our Help Center for more videos just like this one. Thanks so much and have a great day.